Welcome to yet another episode of ERG TV. Back with Perry G. Perry,
What's
get down.
happening?
Welcome back. It's not a welcome back. We see each other every day. But anyway, it's good to chop it up with you today. It's been about a month since we last sat down. We're at the end of January 2024. Last time we were here, we were trying to predict what the year would look like in the beginning of the year. So what have you seen so far? We're 1 month into 2024. What kind of stuff are you seeing? Are you surprised? Did you predict it? Where are we at?
Yeah, so, I have the magic crystal ball, right? And I said, all right, here are your lotto numbers, number one, and here's how the market's going to be, number two.
Right.
But no, just kidding. In reality, market predictions, we're coming out of a time where you literally didn't take too much skill to be involved. At that point, there are a lot of for sale by owners. They're like, oh, the market rate's up. My neighbor sold their house for this. I can definitely do that. So, one thing that I've learned is that when the market's doing good, you have a lot of for sale by owners. But when the market corrects itself, like how we're going into right now, it takes skill, right? And so we're going from that kind of market to a market now where it takes realtors who actually have skill, who do a lot of preparation and know where the market's at. They literally have the finger on the pulse. And most importantly, they know how to communicate that to their clients of, hey, here's where you're at. Here's what it's going to take to get you where you want to go next.
Right.
So from what I've seen, what I always like to tell my clients is that real estate, it's hyper local. Okay. We're talking about Milwaukee, Wisconsin here. And Milwaukee is a perfect place to also invest in real estate as well. But what I do notice for a lot of my clients in Milwaukee is that it can also be neighborhood and zip code specific. So for example, if we go to like the suburbs of Milwaukee, let's just say, for example, maybe we go to like a New Berlin or we go to a Franklin or anything like that, it can be really hot. Like you get a listing and then 1 to 2 days later, it already has an accepted offer. Mm-hmm. But then again, I can go to maybe another part of Milwaukee where you have a beautiful remodeled home, looks like something that's HGTV quality, and literally you have like little to no traffic, or it's been sitting there for like 45, 60 days, and even sometimes to the point where it's getting ready to expire. So once again, I think it's hyper local.
That's right. It's strange to see that because you would think it would be everywhere, but it's not. And back to for sale by owner, what I noticed, even when the market was hot, like in 2022, like everything was selling fast, right?
Yeah.
Even for sale by owners, they sit back and they think, okay, the market's great. But when they really go to do it, the market's great because of us realtors and what we were making happen, right? We were marketing it properly. We were getting, everything that needed to happen for a listing we were doing. They think that they could just put it on Zillow or whatever and then it would fly. I think I sold 7 for sale by owners last year. And even more in 2022. They put it on the market. I connected with them, and they're getting crickets. What do people think when they think of for sale by owner? They think of discount, right?
Exactly.
Right. So they got that going for them. They got a ton of people coming through their house, calling their phone. They're not qualified. So I say to them, it's like, hey, are you having fun with that parade of unqualified people yet? And like, Kevin, give me 2 more days. I was like, you sure you want to do this 2 more days? They're like, not really.
Exactly.
Just come over. So even though it was a hot market, it's because we made it that way.
Yep.
We were getting our clients anywhere from 30 to 60,000 over in general. And so for sale by owners still have a very small percentage of success. And that's where we come in to help them out. I always used to say for sale by owners, really a call for help.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for me, for sale by owners, whenever I come across any, first of all, I always commend them. I'm like, you know what? First of all, congratulations for, having the confidence to go ahead and say that, you know what? I got this. Let me go ahead and give it a shot. So I'm never going to downplay anybody
100%
who wants to be able to try something on their own. That's, you either win or you learn, right? And so for a lot of for sale by owners, it's a learning experience for them. They're like, you know what? It's not as easy as they make it seem on HGTV. It's not going to be all this glimmer and glam. they realize, okay, I'm doing this by myself. There's a lot of things that I wasn't aware of that goes on behind the scenes. And they realize, you know what? I need some help. I don't really know what I'm doing. And then when they have that humbling aha moment, it takes somebody like you and I who have genuinely been there from them from day one, right? We gave them a call. We said, hey, I have a pulse on the market. I noticed that you just listed your house. Hey, I'm a realtor, but yes, I'm here to help you when you need it, right? What kind of questions do you have for me that can kind of help you along with your journey? Once again, I'm going to let you have it. This is your property. You say you want to do it on your own, but just in case, I'm here for you when you need it. And so that's what's most important, is because it shows them, hey, this person's not like every realtor. They're not trying to steal my listing. They actually have confidence in me and they genuinely want to help me get the job done. And then you follow up, right? The fortune's in the follow up. And so it's important, like maybe once a week or whatever. Hey, how are things going? I gave you that tip last week. Did you get a chance to implement it? What's kind of the feedback that you got from there? And then literally, I think it's, what did I say, about 4 weeks to six weeks is usually when they kind of throw up the white flag. And they're like, man, you know what, Perry? First of all, thank you for being there for me. You weren't pushy, you weren't salesy. You genuinely wanted to help. I'm at a point now where I think I'm ready to have you be my listing agent.
Right. And I think that's a great point. And you're right. We do, give credibility or credit to them for, trying to do it, right? You don't want to downplay that and make anybody feel bad. But the reality of it is that's what we do, and that's why we have success, right? And I think it's funny, most of them don't really understand numbers because they just don't calculate what it really costs. So a big thing is getting that seller net proceeds. I'm like, what do you want to make? What do you want to put in your pocket after this? And then we work the numbers backwards. I say 9 out of 10 times when we did it, we covered our commission in buy-side commission too in the price that we got for them. So ultimately we worked for free. We removed stress, we got rid of headaches, and we gained new clients for life. And they got a new understanding of how this works.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because when I have these conversations with, those who want to try it on their own, I tend to think to myself, I'm the type of person, I know my limitations. I specialize in real estate, but I am completely clueless when it comes to anything else. Like, for example, I was in the automotive industry before getting into real estate. And I always tell people, hey, I sell cars. I don't fix cars, right?
Right.
So, I'm not going to go ahead and be the person who goes on YouTube trying to fix my car. No, I'm going to give it to the specialist because they know what they're doing. I know I'm in good hands and they're worth every penny because they're going to know that I'm being well taken care of. And it's no different than real estate. Just say, hey, you know what? I'm dealing with the largest asset that I'll probably ever own. Do I really want to take on that responsibility and possibly botch things up? No, why would you do that? You're going to have a financial planner or a CPA that's going to handle your assets. So no different. Why wouldn't you want to sit down with a professional who knows the neighborhood, who knows how to get the job done, regardless of what's going on in the market?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I haven't seen that many this year. More people are raising their hands. So back to the early 2024 we're in, I feel positive about it because I was looking at my sales last year and how many people we helped at this time last year, and we have more. And last year wasn't bad, but so I have big expectations for this year. We're starting to see the multiple offers, not in every neighborhood, but in most of them, right? So I think that's going to get people off the fence. People, whether you're waiting for interest rates to drop or not, life happens. And some people's lives happen and they have moves they have to make regardless of what interest rates are or not. The sellers you're meeting with, are most of them that are raising their hand right now, are they like life situations? Are they investors? A little bit of both? What kind? Because you have a few listings you've sold already this year. You got a few more in the pipeline coming up. What kind of people are we talking about?
Absolutely. So, first of all, the market that we're going into now, coming out of last year, if you look at the stats from this past year of what we're coming out of, they literally say that it was the second worst history in real estate for transactional sales since 2008.
Which is hard to, I wasn't in it in 2008, and I don't believe you were either. But that's hard to believe. I mean, I believe it, but it's hard to imagine that because it didn't feel like it for us per se.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly. And so, even though I was not in real estate in 2008, ironically, though, in 2008 is when I began my career in car sales and got in the automotive industry. And my friends and family are like, Perry, you're absolutely nuts. Right now, the economy is going in a slump. Real estate in 2008, just took this dramatic change, and, houses were losing value. And then also just the economy as a whole during that time, there was a lot of government bailouts that were happening. Automotive industries were shutting down, and they're like, you really want to start a career where everybody is getting out of the industry? And here's what I learned. Not just only those in the automotive industry, but, a lot of those that I look up to as mentors in the real estate industry who've been through the ebbs and flows. They've been in it in the 80s. They've been in the 90s. They've seen 2008 and they survived 2003 or 2023. And here's what they told me is, number one, put your blinders on and ignore what's going on in the media.
Right.
Anybody who has made it successfully in any endeavor will tell you straight out, it doesn't matter what the economy is doing. There's always money to be made. And a lot of times people become really successful coming out of a time period that might seem like rock bottom. Right. So that's exactly what I did is, being newer, a few years into the real estate industry and getting to a part now where we're talking more about skill versus just, plug and play type of deal. I'm really thankful that they gave me that advice, because those who had plans, those who, took the time to do things right, that there was money to be made.
Anybody will tell you, especially people that have been through it, like not my ex mentor, I was on her team, Kristen Cole would always say there's always opportunity in the shift. Mm-hmm. There's market share either lost or gained in the shift. Which side do you want to be on, right? Those who went home and went boo-hoo, woe is me, lost market share, and they probably dropped out of real estate. They're probably part of the 20 or 25% in the industry that left in 2023 towards the end of last year, right? So if you're going to double down, triple down on activities in your shift, you're going to come out on the other end. In fact, I don't know if you read the book yet, Shift or Not, highly recommend it.
Yep.
So yeah, if you can plan and you don't, give in to what, the world is crashing around you when it's really not, you could do well. Cause bad year or not, we still sold over 25,000 homes in Wisconsin last year.
And that's amazing. 25,000 homes were still sold in the worst market real estate condition that we've seen since 2008. And then, across the nation, I think it was 4.1 million homes were sold. Okay.
Right.
Here in the Metro Milwaukee area, we have, I believe, 5,000 licensed agents. And for those who stuck it out and survived the storm, congratulations, you made it. Right. The best part is we're in a whole new year now. So what are you going to do different to not only just survive, but actually thrive? And, one thing that, has always stuck with me ever since elementary school, I remember one of my teachers talking about it. We're learning about like President Lincoln and things like that. And they said something like in his younger years, like, hey, he chopped down this cherry tree, but he spent 5 hours sharpening the axe and only 3 hours to cut it down. And that stuck with me even still to this day. And even in real estate. Okay, great. What are the systems and processes and routines I'm going to have in place? Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to do that. But then once you've gotten that in place, it doesn't take much time to execute it, right? And so that's really important. And so also, with that being said, you talked about sellers, okay? What kind of sellers am I seeing right now in this current market? I deal with both. When I first got in, I had a lot of clients who are investors, but now I'm starting to get more clients that, maybe they had bought their first time house, and now because of life circumstances, it can either be, hey, we just had a surprise baby. Hey, surprise, right? Or maybe, we just got out of the holiday and, somebody just did a proposal and now, hey, wedding bells are in the air, things like that. It's time for us to be able to get our first house.
Right.
Or, let's face it. I hate to say it too, but there's also the opposite. Maybe somebody just recently became a widow and they went from being a 2-income household down to a single household. And maybe the kids are all grown and, they need to make that necessary move. So for you, what you're talking about is, for me, the sellers that I'm seeing more, it's more life circumstantial. And, that's what the two things we as realtors, we have no control over. We don't have control over circumstances, and we don't have control over timing, but we just have to be there for when the timing and the circumstances make the opportunity to shine, right?
And that comes back to, making the connections, checking in with people. You'd be surprised what comes up when you just check in with people.
Exactly.
Right? It's not about getting a sale. It's like, these are people, these are people who are either friends or past clients. And, you generally want to know what's happening in their life. And if something is happening that they need help with, I want to be there. Just on 2 days ago on Sunday, I have a past client / friend. I've sold 3 properties for her, right? She went through a life situation, sold a property, bought one, then bought another one. And she's finally in the house where she's, her life is where it wants to be. But she texted me, she sent me a picture of her laundry sink on a Sunday, right? She's like, Kevin, I can't do laundry because my sink's backed up. Who do you got for me on a Sunday afternoon? Plumbers are difficult on Sunday, right? She's a flight attendant and she had to wash her uniform and get stuff so she could fly out Monday. But here I am, her realtor, and I'm the first person she went to, right? Or maybe she tried something else and she couldn't find anybody. I had somebody there by 3:00 that day. And then I got the text, thank you so much. She came in and fixed it. And, life is good. So, checking in, staying relevant with people. And it's not always about selling something. It's about, like you said, helping people, being a resource, and just being that guy that they can go to when they need any type of help, whether it's a plumbing or electrical or a contractor, you name it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And one thing you always talk about is, hey, you need to put in a series of deposits before you eventually get a withdrawal, right? And, it makes me think about one of my investor clients. So there's a gentleman from Long Island. He has a lot of real estate that he does on the East Coast, but he's just starting to hit the Midwest. And actually, he was referred to me by a good family friend who owns his own real estate firm, took on a lot of business. And he's like, you know what, Perry? He's like, I know you deal with a lot of investors. Here's a gentleman from Rhode Island, or from Long Island. And you know what? I'm going to refer him over to you because I know you deal with investors. I know he's going to be in good hands. And so for me, that spoke a lot of volume. Number one, the fact that, a real estate broker from a whole different firm said, hey, I'm going to trust you with this, and here you go. And in the beginning, it was deposit after deposit after deposit with zero expectation of anything in return. In the beginning, it was, hey, can you go ahead and let me know the neighborhoods? Here are the neighborhoods that I'm thinking of. Can you kind of give me the comps? Is this a really good area for investors to be able to go ahead and invest in this area? And then he ended up buying a property with the gentleman that referred me the business. Okay. Mm-hmm. But the cool part is fast forward a year later, the last thing he asked me for, and I was in the middle of, continual education. He's like, hey, who do you know that's a plumber, have a dire situation and things like that. Thankfully, I've already been having an extensive network and already knew exactly, of some of the plumbers to be able to give them. And it's the little things like that made all the difference, because not even 5 minutes later, he's like, you know what? I'm thinking about selling my property. Can you do me a favor? Let's go ahead and talk about, is now the time to sell it? And what are the things that we need to get my house sold on the market? A year later.
That's great. I mean, that goes to the point. You show up, you're a resource, and then things happen,
Mhm.
right? He probably had 10 realtors he could have called to list that property, right?
Exactly. I mean, let's face it. They say that the average person knows at least 10 to 12 realtors.
Yeah.
Clearly, this guy's an investor. We know he has 10,
Probably
more than
20.
10 to 12, exact 20, 200 realtors. You never know. But the
Right.
fact is that I was always there whenever he needed it. Time along with a sense of urgency and the fact that I genuinely cared and I never expected anything in return. And he appreciated that. And so when the opportunity finally arose, he gave me that opportunity. He's giving me a shot.
Right. Nor would when you put in time and do those things, you may get a thank you, but financially you get zero. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
So it's not, I think people realize that. They're like, we go an extra step to do things for them that doesn't always mean dollar signs, right?
Absolutely. And, this is one thing that, I've always been a firm believer in, and I always tell my kids the same thing, is that if you do the right thing, money will follow.
Correct.
Right? So people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so with me being a licensed realtor, I know that I have a fiduciary responsibility to put everybody else's needs above my own. It's not about commission, and it's the sad part is you can tell the difference between a transactional agent, right, and a relational agent. A transactional agent is what they call somebody who has commission breath, and people can read that. They can totally understand that, like, hey, you're totally coming at me as a transaction and not actually as a person.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely a relational aspect and type of person that, relationships is what matters, because transactions finish when the transaction is done. Okay, great. You made one commission check, but we all know that this is a lifelong relationship, right? And so I always tell my clients that, hey, just because we closed on your property, the relationship doesn't end here. This is just the beginning.
That's good.
So KG, one of the things that I love about you, man, is that, not only do you have your pulse on real estate, and not only are you an awesome team leader too, but you also are an example of, hey, there's more than one way to be successful in real estate. And everybody knows that, most of my clients are investors. So when a lot of them are buy and holds, fix and flips, etc. And that's what I want to touch on is I noticed that, you and I were just recently chatting and you have a flip that you're working on right now. So can you kind of give us a little bit of this story and background, how you came across the property and how you decided to say, this property would be a really good flip for my exit strategy?
Right. It's funny. This rehab has been, it was my biggest project year to date. Most of them have been, cosmetic-y type stuff, painting, redoing a bathroom, stuff like that. Where I found it, over the years, you meet people, right? And this is like a whole nother world. So we have our realtor world of the people we know that are realtors. And then there's a whole nother world of people that do rehabs and wholesaling and off-market properties. It's like going into a whole nother realm because most of them aren't licensed and they don't have the same responsibilities, fiduciary responsibilities we have. So you have to be careful. You can't just buy everything you see. You can't lead with, if I led with my wants and my brain, without thinking brain, that part of the brain, you would be grabbing everything where it's real tempting. I'll take it. But you really have to kind of slow down and take a step back and say, all right, does this make sense? And you have to have your calculators and that calculate your costs. And you have to have your contractors that walk through with you and say, all right, this is about what it's going to cost. Because if you think it's going to cost you $100,000 to fix up, it's probably going to be $150,000. So you have to be prepared for that. But my network on the side, this most recent one was a guy that I've done a couple wholesales with on the side. And, he's like, KG, I got this property, come take a look. And it was in the area I wanted to be in. But if I didn't know him or, make an effort to know these other people and get in these groups, I probably never would have seen it because it wasn't on the MLS, right? So just be careful. have your resources ready, know who your contractors or who they're going to be and about what it's going to cost before you engage in any of it.
You touched on the fact that doing your numbers is really important, right? Okay, so the two things that, I always talk about with investors, whether they're a novice and they're just getting started or whether they have the experience and it's a good refresher for them, is number one, choosing your market, right? Choosing the right market it can make you or break you. If you choose the wrong market, it's definitely going to break you. But choosing the right market, there's money to be made in that. So number one, choosing the right market is extremely important. And people are like, well, Perry, how do I choose the right market? Well, look at investor activity, right? Where are all the investors doing their fixes and flips and things like that? That's a really simple, fix and flip 101 way to do so is, all right, well, who do I know who is doing a lot of business in the area and where are they currently actively doing business? That's the easiest way to do so. And then number two, you touched on this is the numbers, right? Okay. You don't want to go after just anything and everything. You have to be strategic about it. And this is where it's more of a transactional aspect versus an emotional aspect, right? You got to leave the emotions out of it. It's all about the numbers in the end.
Yeah, and that's tough for me sometimes because you get excited about a property, like, yes. It's the emotional. You gotta be able to shut it off because you'll want to grab everything and not everything makes sense.
100%. Another big thing I always talk about with investors too is, yes, it may be your end goal to fix and flip this property, but what are your strategic exit strategies just in case life happens and it doesn't pan out the way that you want it to? And so I always tell people, obviously doing the numbers, but what are, plan B and plan C just in case plan A doesn't pan out? A big example was summer of 2022, all of a sudden we went from having the opportunity where, hey, I can buy, way above normal and I can go ahead and just sell it for some crazy astronomical number because there's so many buyers right now who would pay top dollar for it. And then all of a sudden there was this crazy shift where it just did a 90-degree turn and you're like, wait a second. Now I have all these properties on hand and I'm in trouble. Like, what am I going to do? I thought I was going to make X amount of money. The numbers made sense. And then all of a sudden we had this life-altering moment in the summer. Like, what the heck? Like that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I always tell people it's so important to have, a series of exit strategies just in case plan A doesn't work out.
Exit strategies and maybe a hold strategy, right? Because if you don't want to take a loss and you want to, hold on to it, will rent cover your costs, right? So that would be a good plan B. All right, if I can't sell this at this amount, right, which hopefully you can, we'll rent cover it, I'll hold it and watch the equity go up and then maybe sell it in a year or two.
Exactly. And so that's what I tell a lot of my clients too is, hey, your strategy is fix and flip, but let's also figure out, will this make a good buy and hold property if I need to hold on to it just in case until circumstances change, and that way I can go ahead and flip out of it? Or maybe, this is a good little segue, but maybe I need a 1031 exchange it.
Right. 1031 exchange, won't go into all the details, but basically when you sell a house, it's a good way to defer tax and identify your next property, right? I had a listing on the market and the agent had a client who needed to do the 1031 exchange, and they're real good to work with because what is it? It's cash.
Yep.
Right. So, there were two other offers on the property, but here he came, Mr. 1031 exchange with a cash offer. He didn't get an inspection because those guys know houses. They're comfortable walking through and, being able to see within 10 or 15 minutes if they're okay without an inspection, right? The first time home buyer doesn't always do that, right? So he did a 1031 exchange. We closed in like 12 days. My seller was obviously happy because he beat the other offers, closed fast, cash, no moving parts, right? And then he calls me the next day. He's like, all right, we got to buy 3 more properties. What do you got? So we're working on another deal as we speak. And we'll probably do an off-market thing with them. We're still working out the details, but 1031 exchange are fun to deal with, especially if you have a listing. And if your client's in that position, they have a good chance of winning in a tough market.
Absolutely. And so, clearly we can do a whole another podcast just on 1031 exchanges alone. So that's why, we're just going to just briefly touch on it. One thing that's important about 1031 exchanges, this is where like properties, apples to apples, are really important as well. Okay. Another thing that's really important too is that you can't be the owner who lives in the property. It has to be an investment property in order for the 1031 exchange to be able to be a viable option. And so a couple things really important is that there is a time limit on there, right? If you're deciding to do a 1031 exchange, you don't have an entire year to do so. You literally have I think it's 180 days tops
to identify a property.
Right. So it's 45 days from the moment that you've completed that transaction for the sale of the property that you had listed. Okay, great. Now the timeline starts. We have exactly 45 days tops. I always tell people, don't wait till the 45 days. The sooner we can take action, the better, because that 45 days is subtracted from the total of the 180 days that you have to complete the 1031 exchange. You only have 45 days tops to identify.
45 to identify, then complete. Yep.
Exactly. Also real quick, just to piggyback off of 1031 exchanges, also important to understand that you as the investor cannot have your hands on any of the profit that you made. Okay. You have to have an intermediary, who basically is a middleman who is there to help facilitate that exchange. So a couple good intermediary examples would be like title companies, maybe a real estate attorney who, specializes, keyword is specialist, not a generalist, or maybe like a CPA who can help out with that 1031 exchange. Also, what's really important too is the fact that that intermediary is also going to open up an escrow account for those profits to go into to help with that transaction when that time comes. So once again, you as the investor cannot have your hands in the cookie jar, right? So there has to be somebody who's there to throughout that entire process. And lastly, most important too about that, when you're choosing an intermediary, you want to make sure that they have what they're called fidelity bonded. And the way...
Which every title company pretty much has it for sure. But go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so basically fidelity bonded is, considered as like a form of malpractice insurance, right? Somebody who, the just in case oops type of deal, you want to make sure that they are fidelity bonded.
Right. And one other thing that not everybody knows, so if let's say your proceeds are $200,000 and you want to do it in the 1031 exchange, you can't take out I'm going to keep 15 grand here. It's got to be all or nothing.
Exactly.
So you got to be able to identify that next property, be able to put that whole chunk that you just made into the next property. You can't take some out and then use some. So
right. And exactly. And the last little thing I want to touch about on that too, is the fact that these three properties that you're going to identify as the possibilities to a 1031 exchange into, they have to be, within 200% of the fair market value or within basically double the fair market value. So that's also really important too. It can't be like, hey, here's a $100,000 property. I'm going to go ahead and invest in $1 million property, right? So there's that restriction as well.
Right. That's a big one.
That is a big one.
Back to life situations. People aren't able to wait for the interest rates to drop. Things are happening in their life. They're called distressed sellers. They have something in their life that's making them make a move. Do you come across any distressed sellers? And if yes, what's your strategy with them? How do you approach that if it's any different than a regular client?
Sure, absolutely. So I have, a couple investor clients and even a couple wholesaler clients that, I help when they come across sellers that are in a distressed situation. And so what is distress situation? There's a couple examples. It can be financial distress. Okay. Maybe it's somebody who, recently lost a job, somebody who, just got a, maybe reduced hours, things like that. And they just can no longer financially afford to make the mortgage payment. They tried everything under the sun. They reached out to their mortgage company to see, what kind of programs that they can do. Maybe they did a loan remodification and it's still not enough. Okay, that's somebody who's in a financial distress situation. Also, a lot of the times it can be somebody who where the property itself is distressed, right? It's what we would consider like a fixer-upper. It's a property that needs a little bit of TLC or a lot of TLC in some cases, and they're like, you know what? I just don't have the funds to do so. I need to sell this property now and figure out an alternative where I'm going to live. Those are like the two main distressed kind of situations that I tend to deal with whenever I have clients that are in a distressed situation.
Right. I like that you're able to meet with them and counsel them, because this is what can happen. Many times, not every, but many times they have, like, for example, they may just throw in the towel, throw up their arms and let the bank take it. Where I'm like, well, let's look at your numbers. What do you owe on it? Let's see what we can get you for it. If you can break even and not have a foreclosure on your record, that's a win. Even better, maybe we could put some money in your pocket, get you out of this situation. That way we can send you on your way. Maybe you make 10 grand or 15 grand and we get you out of this situation. Then you got some money for a rental, rebuild your life and get going again. And it's interesting. I find it amazing sometimes how properties can get like in bad shape quick, or I don't know if it's quick, but I've walked through some places and they said it was distressed and needed some work. And when I walked in, it had like the typical stuff, messy room, the bathroom was kind of jacked up. And then we got to the second floor, I could hear, it happened to be raining that day, I could hear this dripping. I'm like, what is that dripping I hear? And we got to the second floor and it literally had a big, probably 10-foot wide hole in the roof. So it was cold in there. And obviously nobody had been living there, but the city was coming for her. She had back taxes. And then we were able to find a situation where it was tough. It was a tough sell because there's a lot of work to do. But at least we were able to get her out of that situation, pay off her tax bill. And she had already moved somewhere else, but she had that liability. So we were able to come in and get a buyer who was going to fix it up and eventually sell it again.
Right. And so whenever I help my clients that are in a distressed situation, once again, whether it's financial or whether it's the property itself, the first question I always ask them is, do you want to stay in the house? Because let's face it, anybody who is a homeowner, they did exactly what they needed to do to improve on their credit, make sure that their debt to income ratio is aligned, saving up for the down payments, things like that. It was a journey just to be able to get the house. And in addition to that, now that they have the house, there's a lot of memories that are there. And so, it's really hard for somebody to be able to part ways with something that they worked so hard to be able to obtain. And so, of course, as a realtor, yes, do we want the listing? Sure. But like I said before, people don't care how much you know until you know how much you care.
Right.
And the way that I show people that they care is, hey, do you want to live in the house still? Or are you ready to put your hands up and say, let's go ahead and move on to the next chapter? But if they say, Perry, you know what? I really want to stay in the property. This is a property that, my mom and dad built, and they left it in the family will, and just life just happened. If there's a way that we can save the house, let's do so. Right? Because they're really going to appreciate that you made sure that you put them first. So that's priority number one. Priority number two is they say, hey, you know what? I just throw my hands up. I don't want to keep the property. I'm done with the property. Okay, great. Now I know that there's motivation behind it, that there is a real compelling reason why we should list the house. Well, let's go over those options are. So I call it the 4 pillars. There's 4 things that go with every client, whether it's distressed or not, is, hey, number one, what's the motivation? If there's no motivation there, then there's really no reason for them to sell their house. It's just an idea. Okay. Right. But if there's motivation behind it, now there's a compelling reason for them to want to hire me as the realtor to get the job done. Number 2, okay, what about timeline? Is this something that we're able to do within the next 30 days, or is it something that you want to do this year, right? So now when I know the motivation, I know the timeline, I know the strategic strategies of what we can do to get that done. And then the last 2 things are obviously the price and the condition. Those 4 things are extremely important, whether they're a distressed seller or just a seller that is able to sell on the retail market. And from there, I can then determine a price strategy and some game plans that would make sense for their situation of what they want as the outcome.
Perfect. That's what we're here to do. Your number one, when you ask, do they want to remain in the house? I gotta say, I bet 9 out of 10 people they meet won't ask that question. They're thinking of a listing, whatever money they could make and sell the house, right?
It's very true, and that's the sad part. And once again, that differentiates the person to tell right away, are they a transactional agent or are they a relational agent? Right. And once again, just right there, you know exactly what kind of agent's in front of you. And you want to deal with somebody who is going to sympathize with you, put yourself in their shoes, and try to understand what they're going through. And that's why it's so important. And sometimes I got to give them the sad reality that, hey, you told me you want to stay in the house. We've tried every single angle possible to help you stay in the house, but let's rip the Band-Aid off and let's just come to the realization that you have to move.
Right.
Okay? A lot of people who go through those distress situations in the beginning, they go through denial. Like, hey, this is not real. This is not happening.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when the reality hits, they're literally, it's almost too late, right? They may call you 2 weeks to a few days before foreclosure or anything like that. And you're like, man, this is why we talked about this like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So, one thing I want to talk about in Wisconsin is, Wisconsin is a judicial state, right? Okay. So if there's anybody going through a foreclosure process or anything like that, it must go through the judicial system. And what does that mean? That means that, hey, they gave notice to the homeowner, to the seller, that, hey, your property is getting ready to go on foreclosure process. But also being in a judicial state, the positive part for the homeowner or the seller is the fact that there's time. Okay, in Wisconsin, there's actually an ample amount of time. I mean, you have anywhere between 12 months to 18 months before it officially forecloses on. Now, here's the thing. Because of the fact that in the state of Wisconsin, there's so many opportunities to get back on track, programs and things that are out there, they don't, banks and the government, they're not in the business of real estate. They don't want to take your home. They don't want to deal with it. They would rather help you to get back on track if you genuinely want the help. But here's the thing. If you get to the point now where it's officially foreclosed on, in Wisconsin, we are not a redemption state. We've given you 12 to 18 months to do what it takes to stay in the household. Once that property becomes a sheriff's sale and it's done, it's done.
Yeah, it's a wrap. There's no going back from that. So I know it's sad, but some people may, if I ignore this letter or don't answer my phone, it'll go away. It doesn't go away. The time starts ticking, and hopefully they'll reach out to you before that happens.
Yes, and I'll be honest. Like I said, I'm a big people person. I like to know that people are being taken care of and that they have options. So once again, it should never get to the point where you get foreclosed on. There is time. If there's at least 30 days, there's definitely times to turn around that situation.
Right.
Let's get together. Let's come up with a game plan and see what we can do to get you out of that situation.
Agreed.
So we're wrapping up today's session. Obviously, the session was all about sellers, listings, how to prepare for it, what kind of agents do you want to work with, whether it's transactional or relational. Once again, another emotional topic we talked about is sellers that are in distress situations. Like I said before, you should never get to the point where you get foreclosed on. If you're ever in a foreclosure type situation, please reach out to me. I have a network of people who are literally there to make sure that everything happens the way that needs to be done, whether you're looking to stay in the house or whether you're like, you know what, Perry, it's time and we need to move. Let's talk about what those options are and help you out. KG, I just want to say thank you for all that you do. This was a phenomenal podcast. I always enjoy doing these podcasts with you. And once again, to our viewers, thank you, because, this is the reason why we keep things going, is to educate you guys. And so for those who are just tuning in, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channels. Thank you.